Okay. So serious discussion time, and you know I'm serious because I'm a dad, and dads are always serious. But this time round, rage quitting. Rage quitting. I want to chat about that because I feel it's becoming a bit of a commonplace thing, almost an accepted or sort of something that's put up on a pedestal when you rage quit. And, there's a ton of articles about people rage quitting their jobs. And, that's one thing, but we're here to talk about gaming. So, from a gaming perspective, I guess a few things we need to consider. Well, what is rage quitting? So I'm pretty sure anyone who's a gamer out there or a parent of a gamer will know what rage quitting is, and that is basically when you get so frustrated. Can you feel just the anger building up? That's what. I think I think I just hurt my ribs by clenching a bit too hard. There's a lot of rage there, and that frustration builds up, and it just makes someone quit in frustration and anger. Often times, a bit of a tantrum. So that's sort of the gist of rage quitting. But I think the thing to remember about rage quitting is there are a number of triggers that occur leading up to the rage quit. And the rage quit is really, about that level of frustration getting beyond what we can control, and then it just becomes this sort of really visceral emotional response. There was a really interesting study about what actually causes rage quitting, particularly in relation to video games, which I'll get into in a second. But before that, a few things we need to consider. I guess something to be aware of with rage quitting, there's often indicators that lead up to it. So a lot of physiological responses can start happening. Perhaps the breathing becomes a little bit heightened. A lot of tension in the shoulders, a lot of tension in the muscles. The heart rate will go up, and perhaps the volume, the voice starts getting a little bit louder. Just leading up before we get to that point of no return, which I'm sure we've all sort of seen, or just the tears start coming out. I suppose it happens differently for different people, but the thing is, we need to be really self-aware of that, both as gamers and as parents of gamers, about when those triggers can start to occur. Because I think if you keep an ear out for your little ones, you'll start to notice when that tone of voice starts changing if they're in chat, or perhaps just some little behavioural cues that happen. So, they're things to be aware of. But look, how do we get around this? Well, I guess there's a couple of things we need to address. One is the immediate response. What are we going to do immediately to diffuse the situation? So this is where I think rage quitting actually has a massive learning opportunity for us both as parents. It is an extremely challenging obstacle to overcome. So kudos to you if you can do it or if you have done it. And also for the person who's experiencing rage quit, whether you're the gamer who's experiencing it or, it's your child as the gamer who's experiencing it, for them to have the skills, the techniques, and the control to actually do it. I think that is a hats off moment. So immediately what we need to do is actually just, I think, get away from the trigger. We need to, excuse me for a moment. We need to just remove ourselves. So one way we can actually build that into our gameplay or into our little one's gameplay is by setting timers. So actually having an actual timer set up that goes off after an hour or 45 minutes or, however long you think is a good time to force you to get up, to remove yourself from the screen, to just stretch your legs. Being in this position, I'm seated now, being in this position is not a natural position to be in for an extended period of time. Our bodies are made to move. Stretching the hands, doing hand exercises, and just breathing a little bit, going to get a drink, just something to pull yourself away from the screen for a few minutes. And in doing so, this is like the benefit of it. In doing so, one, you're showing great self-discipline. So kudos to you if you do that. And two, the other thing is that when you get away, there's something called the incubation effect. And what happens during the incubation effect is that it actually gives your brain time to process all the information that it's sort of just been slammed with, and we are getting slammed with a ton of information when we play video games, both visual, auditory, like physically with all the movements and the visceral feeling we get. Our brain needs time to process all of that, and in doing so, we can often come up with solutions to problems. And I'm not just talking about video games now. This is also something in general, right? You start to think of new strategies that you can try next time. But you need the time, you need the breathing space to actually do that. So that's where that as an immediate thing to do, is good. It's good. Now, the other thing we need to consider is the longer term goals of how we're going to do this. So, I think one of the issues, and the studies showing this, is that one of the key causes of anger and this increasing frustration to the point of beyond the point of no return is this feeling of failing, of not being able to achieve your goals. So as a long-term thing, this is more just a mindset thing, right? The good thing about all of this is we actually have complete control over our own response to this, both as parents and as gamers, and something we can teach our kids. If you can't achieve your goal, just shift your goal. Easy, right? Like, if you can't win a solo battle, it's taken me the entire season to win that, and I don't even know how I did it. If you can't win the battle, and that's what your goal is, change your goal. Make your goal to complete a mission, complete a quest. There's so many things you can do in Fortnite. Make your goal to level up. Something that's completely within your control. There are a ton of quests in here. There are so many things you can do within Fortnite to be able to shift your goal. If you're always kicking slightly to the left, just shift your goalpost to the left. And that's one way you can then start to achieve your goals. And that's going to reduce the frustration level. The other thing as well is to find walkthroughs or someone who can show you techniques. So that might be going on YouTube and watching other people show you techniques on how to perhaps set up a loadout, or how to use the weapons effectively, or whatever obstacle you're facing, or whatever game you're facing. So that's something else. There's no shame in actually seeking help, and I think that's something that our culture and our school system kind of don't teach enough of. That actually working together and asking for help is how we actually achieve more, and don't consider that making mistakes or failing is actually makes you any less of a person, or worth any less as a human being. That's definitely not the right way to think about things. You need to think about mistakes and failures as building blocks. Each time you make a mistake, you learn something new from it, and that allows you to take one step higher and one step closer to your goal. So, this is a longer term strategy. This is something that, probably needs a bit more discussion and a bit more breathing room to actually digest. But, it's a good way to think about gaming, and remember why, you got into gaming in the first place. I think often we can forget how far we've actually come. When my wife started playing Fortnite level 1, and then I played it on her account to sort of show her how it's done, it was amazing at how easy it was. And when we were playing duos and trios and, family squads and whatever, oh my goodness, you could literally just stand there and just take pot shots at people and they would just miss. It did not matter how still or how close you stood. People just would miss. And I think we forget that when we start, that's how we all were. So, I think we need to keep it in context, and how much fun we had when we started. How did we get hooked into it? It was it was a lot of enjoyment, right? There was a lot of fun. So we need to keep all of that in mind. So the other thing that, I think we need to all be aware of as parents, and probably to look at ourselves if we can, is, perhaps there is something deeper, right? I don't want to blow this off as you just need to gain self-control, because for some people, anger is a big part of their life, not just in gaming. It's so many aspects of their life. The default response is anger. And I think that's an indicator that they might need to seek further help, right? More help than what you should really be looking for in a YouTube video or a stream like this. But you know, it might be something that alerts people that actually care about them. Say, hey, mate, I'm worried about you. You actually I think you should consider maybe taking a look at your entire lifestyle and sort of just see if you're really happy with where your life is and that sort of thing. You know, and that might mean looking at things like diet. Sleep management is a huge one. Sleep, something I've become acutely aware of now. Sleep management, diet, and exercise. You know, they might be three key things to consider. Learning relaxation techniques such as meditation and breathing. The breathing and setting up your environment to help you relax. You know, these are all really important things to help manage your sort of emotional responses. So, you know, just something to consider. But I did tell you that there was an interesting study that got done regarding the effects of violence, and this goes back to, you know, some of our earlier talks about whether violence in video games or the classification helps and whether the violence actually causes an increase in aggression. Because there's an interesting study done by the University of Rochester, and what they basically found out, long story, too long didn't read, TLDR, is I just had to remind myself what the letters were. So you can tell I'm not in the in crowd. What they actually found that their study looked at the psychological experience of people when playing video games and not just the content of the video games. And what they found out was that it was the feeling of failure, which we spoke about earlier, that actually, and that frustration that actually caused the increase in aggression and hostility. So they did a lot of tests. They had a lot of, I think they were mainly college-age students, so young adults. And one of the tests they did was they got the participants to stick their hand in a bucket of freezing ice, cold water, and they had to hold it in there for 25 seconds. And they were led to believe that it was the previous participant who had set the amount of time they had to keep their hand in there, right? And then they got to play a game of Tetris-like game. It wasn't Tetris itself; it was a rigged form of Tetris. If Tetris could get any more rigged, but anyway, it was a rigged form of Tetris, and there was either an easy mode or a hard mode. And you know how you manipulate Tetris, right? Like easy mode is just all squares and the straight pieces, and the hard mode is all the freaking S-shaped things that no one wants when you don't want them, which is pretty much all the time. You know, I reckon that's how they rigged it. But anyways, a rigged game. After the rigged game, then they were asked to set a time for the next participant that they had to stick their hand in the bucket of ice, freezing ice cold water. And what they found was that the people who played the hard version of Tetris, the rigged version, they on average set a time 10 seconds longer than those who played the easy version. So what they deduced from the experiment was that things that threaten our ego are more likely to bring out hostility towards others. So that's something really important to remember, because it was regardless of the content of the game, right? It's Tetris, probably the most non-violent game like ever. So even being exposed to a game like that, but having that level of frustration and challenge to your competency and not being able to win or achieve the goal, you know, would cause people to become a bit more aggressive or have more aggressive thoughts or a bit more hostile. And this is true. You know, because anecdotally, and we all know that one person's experience just counts for everything. What happened? Tell me this: when your cheeks get clapped in a battle, how do you? When you see the person, you watch the person who's eliminated you, and bam, they get taken from behind. How does that make you feel? Come on, come on. The smile comes out, doesn't it? Yes, yes, we do. We just, we love the revenge shots. So, I completely I can see how that, that could happen, as discussed by or that's found out by the researchers. So this brings us on to the next point. This is particularly for parents, I think, of gamers, because I've got friends, who they've got kids and their kids probably don't quite sort of handle the losses as well as one would hope. So it's important to have a plan, right? You got to think of this as like an evacuation plan. When this starts escalating, you need to implement that evacuation. You don't make the evacuation plan as the house is burning down. You need to have made it and practiced it, and practice your response, because it is so easy to get caught up in this. But the first thing, we need to make sure people are safe. Because some people can have a really violent outburst, so we need to make sure our child is safe, other people in the household are safe. That's the first thing we need to figure out what to do. And the second thing is calm. We need to be calm. Yeah, calm. All right. So at the moment, we've actually got we've adopted a new dog, and he was hyper anxious. Like, I mean, on 2 types of medication anxious. Man, this guy was like, I could see why he just kept getting handed back to the pound. And we started watching a lot of Cesar Milan videos, and something Cesar always says: calm. You got to be calm. You got to have the calm energy, the calm vibes. That's what's needed. You need to be assertive, and you need to be calm. Chill them beans, right? So that's what that's what we've been practicing. And it's interesting because all these, like, I think a lot of that aggressive, emotional, visceral response that we see in rage quitting is what we tend to see in animals, because animals don't have the other parts of their brain for reasoning and high level thinking. It's just that gut response they have, and that's what takes over in people as well when they rage quit. So I think a lot of those management of that is going to be the same. So we need to stay calm, we need to stay assertive. We shouldn't get sucked into it. That's something that I think we can all get caught up in. If you've ever had an argument with your wife, husbands out there, come on, be honest here. And you just get sucked into that argument, and that argument just happens. And it's probably the same argument you've had on multiple occasions. That is what, like, people, we all get sucked into it. And it's important. We just need to step back and not take anything personally that's being said. Don't yell back. We need to bring the energy level down. All right, so that's sort of how we start to set up the thing. We need to be aware that we can't talk someone out of a rage session, a rage quit. That energy needs to dissipate naturally, and we just need to wait it out. Calm surrender, as Cesar Milan says. If you've ever watched it, there's a hilarious video of him reacting to an episode of South Park that he goes to train Cartman. And it's all those things, right? Like trying to calm the situation and being assertive, having a plan. And I think another important thing is not changing your values or your expectation of behavior to suit the aggression. If smashing things isn't appropriate, if yelling and swearing and abuse people isn't something that you think is appropriate behavior, you still can't allow that, right? And it doesn't mean you get angry about it, and that's probably a whole nother discussion and sort of think tank we need to have on that. But we need to be very controlled at that point. We can't talk someone down from it, and we don't want to change our values. We still need to remain assertive, and perhaps the time for that discussion is going to be at a later point in time. We still need to ensure that our children understand consequences. So while they might smash things, if they put a hole through a wall, it's their responsibility to fix it. If they break something, it's their responsibility to replace it. If they smash their iPad or their controller they're using, there's just going to be no controller. If it's the family controller and you have to replace it, they shouldn't get to use it, right? Because they haven't fixed the problem that they created. There needs to be a level of responsibility and accountability there. We shouldn't just give in to that sort of behavior, because then it just makes them think, oh, well, if I don't get my way, I just smash things, you know? Like, if I don't want someone to bother me, I just get angry. And that's not how we want them to grow up. So there are a few things to keep in mind. Consistency, how we respond, being consistent, I think, from both parents. And this can be super tricky where parents have a different parenting style or it's a co-parenting arrangement. But, you know, I think it's an opportunity for us to look at ourselves, because often I know one thing that happened when I became a dad was that my kids, and my kids still are, whether that's a good thing or not, like little mirrors that reflect my behavior and my personality. And it's not until you see that in someone else and then your wife points it out to you and says, they're just like you, that you realize, oh. So, you know, I think it's a good opportunity for us to reflect about our own behaviors. Do we get angry subconsciously at situations? Is that our response? And so is that the response our kids are picking up? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. You know, like they're all, like, these are all points I think to remember in terms of trying to establish a plan that we can put in place to help our kids control themselves. So that's, you know, that's my discussion, my serious discussion. Rage quitting, look, like, it happens to the best of us, right? But I think we need to take the time to reflect on it and to have the humility to actually go, you know what, that probably wasn't the best way to handle it. What triggered the situation? How would I do it differently next time? How could I get out of that situation? So we covered a few things there. So I hope you remember, you know, particularly setting the timer, something I love, remind me to get up and remove myself from that situation. Having premeditated plans and responses in place, trying to remain calm, looking at other parts of our lifestyle, you know, sleep, exercise, diet, exposure to blue light. As I say this while the screen is burning the image of Fortnite into my retina. So these, you know, these are all things we need to keep in place. Staying well hydrated, like, it's a bit of a balancing act. But anyway, I hope that helped you.